As it happens, Junior, Charles's worker, had been so publicly critical of Charles's leadership qualities that he didn't even think of him as a respectable employer. These accusations were overheard by Charles, who is now embroiled in a furious dispute with them. Charles ought to have understood how crucial it was to keep his team members happy. In the meanwhile, I was offered a position at the international headquarters of our firm. I first kept declining it because of the lingering problems and Charles's circumstances. But I finally accepted the offer, and I'm getting ready to relocate overseas. My father has been concerned about this choice, but in order to keep in touch, we have started practicing video calling. After I depart, I'm thrilled about this chance since it's a position I've always wanted, and I'm prepared to give it my all. Charles, on the other hand, was not much of a help around the house, but Angela never seemed to mind. Charles usually took the lead when they went out, which gave Angela the freedom to relax and enjoy their time together without worry. Their relationship appeared to be harmonious. But when Angela's mother tragically died away, everything changed. When her father contacted while Angela was at work, he told her about her mother's deteriorating condition and eventual collapse. To say goodbye to her mother, Angela rushed to the hospital. For assistance with the funeral planning, she made the decision to remain with her father. Charles said that he couldn't abruptly quit work when she told him. He was only able to attend the funeral and missed the wake as a result. Charles didn't appear to have considered dressing adequately for such a solemn occasion, so I was rushing to find him something to wear at the last minute. Charles, not to be outdone, was not afraid to voice his disapproval and chastise me for not getting his clothing ready sooner. Charles's comments were hard for me to handle because of the weighty emotions and obligations that the funeral brought with it. I eventually decided to ignore them, but this appeared to make him even more grumpy. Our marriage has seemed more strained and has been more prone to disputes ever since that day. Arguments between spouses are common, particularly after 4 years of marriage, but Charles's style has become more and more combative. It is tiresome because he frequently insists on making decisions and telling me what to do. I pushed back a few of times, but he didn't know where anything was stored in our house, so even small chores were laborious, and he was always complaining. I came to the realization eventually that taking care of things alone would just be easier. I haven't always done as Charles has asked me to, though. In an effort to simplify my daily life, I've taken it upon myself to handle some responsibilities autonomously. I recently shared about the first anniversary of my mother's death and the forthcoming gathering. Charles gave me a less than encouraging reaction when I reminded him. He expressed dissatisfaction about a crucial meeting that was set on the same day and questioned how he would be able to make it to the memorial. His justification was that he was unable to simply assign his task to others, particularly in light of his recent promotion, a fact he frequently brags to his younger teammates about. I was so frustrated that I had trouble focusing on how important the anniversary celebration was. It was obvious that he appreciated his new position and duties, since he frequently left me to manage my obligations on my own. It seemed to be a challenge for him to put our family's demands ahead of his professional ones, even with my prodding. Charles was enjoying a beer in the living room when I arrived home from work. Our dinner time was pushed back, and he muttered, "Sorry I'm late." Had to do overtime, clearly irritated that I was running late. With a hint of accusation, he said, "I've been waiting here for an hour." He could have gone ahead and grabbed something to eat because it was just going to be an hour, and he knew he didn't want to cook. After all, I had told him when I planned to arrive. In an attempt to control my growing annoyance, I gave him a takeaway box and said that I picked this up on my way home because I didn't think cooking would take too long tonight. Charles smashed his beer glass down in a quick and angry response. "Takeout again. Aren't you slacking off a bit too much lately?" His criticism stung, especially since it had been about 3 weeks since our last takeout meal. Sure, I had been busy and hadn't been cooking daily, but I always made an effort to ensure we ate balanced meals and didn't overly rely on processed food. His unwarranted critique left me debating whether to even respond. Misinterpreting my silence, Charles added insult to injury. "Can't argue when it's true, huh? Do your chores properly. You've been coming home late and claiming overtime. Maybe you're cheating." His words ignited the resentment simmering within me. "If you know I'm working late, the least you could do is make dinner," I retorted. "You don't have to cook. Picking up takeout isn't that hard. I always tell you when I'll be late, and despite my busy schedule, I manage all the household chores. There's no need for that attitude." Charles glared at me and then threw a low blow. "You're 4 years older, remember? I could have married a younger woman, but I chose you." His words were meant to extract gratitude and obedience. "You should be thankful and listen to me. No one else would want you." His hurtful remarks were meant to diminish me, but they only highlighted the deep issues in our communication and respect for each other. "So if I left, you'd be in trouble, right?" I couldn't believe he just said that. My anger boiled over. "If you wanted a younger woman, you should have married one before we got together. I asked you if you were okay with my age, and you said it was fine. That's why we got married. Believe me, I can manage just fine without you." Charles' response was a mocking laugh. "Fine, let's get a divorce then," he said, grabbing his beer and the takeout before retreating to his room. We had argued many times before, but this felt different. I was fed up with his attitude. I decided to eat my takeout in an attempt to calm down, thinking perhaps he was just hungry and irritable. Yet as I ate, I couldn't shake off the shock of our conversation, especially on the eve of my mom's death anniversary. After a while, I called out to Charles from outside his room. "We need to leave by 7:00 a.m. tomorrow, so I'll wake you up around 6:00. There was no response, but I was sure he was awake. With that, I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up early to find that Charles had already left. The bags I had packed were still in the room. He hadn't left for the gathering without me. Where had he gone? I tried calling his phone, but he didn't pick up. He ignored my text too. With no other option, I left a voicemail and started getting ready to leave alone. I finally reached Charles while waiting for the train at the station. "I have a meeting, can't leave it to my juniors," was all he said before the call ended abruptly. A mix of anger and resignation washed over me. I was stunned and bewildered. Before I could dwell on it further, the train arrived, burdened with the luggage meant for both of us. I boarded alone. Upon reaching my father's house, he asked anxiously, "Where's Charles?" Seeing the sadness in his eyes since my mother's passing, I didn't want to add to his worries. Taking a deep breath, I forced a smile and replied, "Sorry, he got called into an important meeting." He was supposed to come. Charles's recent promotion seemed like a valid reason for his absence, so I reassured my father that it was important for him to prioritize his work. My father nodded in understanding. "I know he's working hard. It's a shame not to see him, but your mother would have understood. Let him know he's always welcome here," he said. His words carried a hint of sadness, but I kept my smile throughout the day. With no word from Charles and the night advancing, I decided not to reach out to him either, planning to stay the night and return home as scheduled the next day. Although it felt a bit childish, the idea of making him his favorite dish, hamburgers, crossed my mind for tomorrow. The next day, after leaving my father's house, I arrived home around noon. Before heading out to the grocery shop, I wanted to drop off my bags. As I walked into the living room, I noticed Charles's dirty laundry scattered about, a familiar sight that made me sigh. He still hadn't learned to use the washing machine. I tossed his clothes in with mine, and after a brief pause, returned to the living room. Something caught my eye on the table. As I approached, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Divorce papers already signed by Charles. Staring in disbelief, I wondered if this was his way of communicating that he wanted a divorce. Grabbing my phone from my bag, I called him, not sure if he would answer during his lunch break. Surprisingly, he picked up immediately. "What's the meaning of these divorce papers?" I asked, my voice a mix of confusion and anger. Charles's response came with a cold laugh. "What's there to question? It's exactly what it seems. I don't want an older wife who won't handle house chores. That's why I want a divorce. If we split, I can find a younger wife. After all, a wife is like a status symbol, right? I can't boast about you." His words were like a blow, reducing our years together to a mere transaction in his eyes, and turning what I thought was a partnership into a superficial arrangement in his view. Charles's words on the phone stung deeply. "It's tough when my team asks about you, and avoiding the topic isn't easy," he said. I was left speechless, unable to muster a response to his blunt criticism. "If you want to avoid a divorce, start doing your chores properly. I'll be home as usual today, so make sure to get some beer, all right? If you disagree, take the divorce papers to court. It's your call." With that, he hung up, leaving me shocked without a word to say. Charles probably assumed I would comply with his demands, believing that I did the chores because I feared losing him or didn't want to seem incapable. Perhaps he thought I wouldn't stand up to him, viewing himself as the dominant partner in our relationship. While some might think being married to a younger husband sounds glamorous, in reality, it's far from remarkable. I had often played up his youth, but honestly, he was just average in looks, personality, and income. There was nothing particularly exceptional about him. Labeling him as younger was merely convenient. When we first married, the age gap of 4 years seemed more significant, but now, both in our 30s, it felt trivial. It was disheartening to constantly be labeled as the older wife when we were practically the same age. Determined to change my situation, I grabbed my bag and headed straight to the family court. Submitting the divorce papers brought a sense of relief, marking the end of our marriage. I realized that I could live without Charles, and with newfound freedom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Taking advantage of the moment, I decided to request a few days off from work. Luckily, my boss understood and granted me a week's leave as work had just slowed down. Now officially divorced, I needed to organize my life with minimal possessions. Cleaning up was easy. I stored larger items in a storage unit, packed essentials and clothes in my car, and on a whim, decided to visit a hot spring resort during the off-season. I found a cheap hotel without any hassle and drove off, filled with excitement, eager to embrace this new chapter of my life. I was fully enjoying the serene atmosphere of the hot springs and relaxing in my hotel room when my phone abruptly rang. "Angela, I asked you to get beer, didn't I? Where are you?" It was Charles, sounding perplexed and slightly irritated. It was his usual time to return home from work. I couldn't help but chuckle as I answered, "I'm at a hot spring resort." "A hot spring resort? Why? What's going on?" Charles sounded both confused and a bit flustered. "Didn't you tell me to file the divorce papers if I disagreed with you?" I reminded him, picturing his bewildered expression, which only made me laugh harder. "Wait, did you really file them?" His tone shifted from confused to perturbed. "Yes, I did. It was your suggestion, Charles. Have you forgotten what you said earlier?" I responded, still amused by his reaction. His voice, now anxious, carried a hint of disbelief. Wait, are you joking? When you say hot spring resort, do you mean some nearby spa? If so, I'll get dinner, so come home soon. I couldn't help but laugh at his sudden change to a seemingly caring tone, as if he was now playing the role of a considerate husband. It took about an hour and a half of driving. There's even an outdoor natural hot spring. It's so relaxing. I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow since you're going to get your dinner. I've already packed my things, so you won't have to worry about me coming back. Take care of yourself. Charles pleaded with me to return, but I had no intention of going back. You're the one who initiated the divorce. Have you forgotten? It was obvious you were using the threat of divorce to try to control me. I told you I could manage without you. Now that you've divorced your older wife, go find a younger one if you can. I don't know if you will, but it's none of my business now, I said firmly. Charles fell silent, clearly stunned by my resolve. Finally, he spoke again, his voice barely audible. But you should consider moving out of that apartment too. Why should I? I responded calmly, even though I was already one step ahead in my thinking. Think about your income. You'll go broke soon if you keep living there. You can't clean, do laundry, or cook. You'll need housekeeping and dining out, right? That costs money. It would be a problem if most of your salary went into rent, he reasoned. I couldn't help but smile a little. You thought you were the provider, but my salary is nearly double yours. You never really provided for me. If anything, it was the other way around. I continued, now getting to the heart of the matter. Also, you were overconfident just because of one junior. But did you know I have multiple juniors under me and even more under them? I don't usually talk about work because you get moody, but I outrank you in both position and salary. You think you'd have noticed after living together. Charles appeared to be keeping his ego intact by gazing down on me, as if he was only now learning the truth. He must feel frustrated now that he was unable to. His pride had been crushed by me, a kind of revenge for all these years. Despite his aggressive conduct, I managed the home tasks without complaining since, in part, I was too lazy to ask him for anything, and in part, I was just younger and gave him some leeway. I was merely attending to your needs in addition to mine. It's not like I required you to stay with me. So naturally, I decided for divorce when you told me to do the chores or we divorce. Now we're strangers. I said goodbye, saying what I had to say before hanging up. I enjoyed the hotel's cuisine afterward, feeling rejuvenated. Charles believed that reconciliation was still possible, as was to be anticipated, but I had already gone on and was relishing this new chapter of my life with a sense of independence and freedom. Charles reached out again, and I smiled sardonically and said, I'm older than you, remember? You wouldn't want me back, I'm sure. It seems that he had not been able to make friends with younger ladies. Charles eventually came to the realization that things were not going his way and moved out of the residence to manage the asset distribution. In an attempt to get more than a fair division of the spoils, I retained legal counsel. I made the case for more pay to reflect the years I oversaw the majority of housework. Charles, being the frugal man, chose not to hire a lawyer, which was a big benefit for me. I'm happy with the result since, with my lawyer's assistance, we were able to achieve a settlement that benefited me. In the meantime, it seemed like Charles's problems at work were only getting started. Charles's leadership style had been openly criticized by a junior team member, who publicly stated that he couldn't even consider Charles to be a boss. After Charles learned of these grievances, there was a furious argument. It was an instance that demonstrated how crucial it is to develop and assist your team, something Charles had obviously failed to do. Regarding my professional life, I had received an opportunity to work in the international headquarters of our organization. I was hesitant to accept it at first because of Charles's feelings and the ongoing personal turmoil. But once my own situation changed, I made the decision to seize the chance completely. Right now, I'm working hard to get ready for the change. My father is a little concerned about this transition, but we've adjusted by practicing video calls to make sure we can continue to communicate when I'm overseas. I'm happy and enthusiastic about the future, eager to pursue the profession I've always wanted. Now that I know I've made the best choices for my life, it's time to give this new chapter my all.